welcome to Pensive Politics and Mr. Watson. I am most certainly your host, Christian Watson. It is so great to be back with all of you again today, as it always is. I always say that when I begin my shows, because it's the truth. It is great to be with you guys. It's great to be talking with you, to be hopefully offering you an insight that you're not getting anywhere else. It's great to be on the Fed by Ravens radio network. Great to be under their employ, under their tutelage, laboring in this war of ideas. It's just great to be with you guys. So, today marks the commencement of a new activity I am undertaking, a new project I'm undertaking. I am going to be producing podcasts every single day of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It'll be a weekly show beginning today. Now, we've already run into a few speed bumps. I'm having to revise my schedule. I'm having to make sure that everything that I'm doing syncs with this. But it's going to be what we do, because this is incredibly important. The ability to get my message out there in a way that is going to be both compelling and frequent, which will probably make it more compelling, because if it's frequent, it'll relate more to things that you guys are following already, not things that I thought about for like 2 days and decided to come use about on the air. And so that's why I'm doing this, because I'm ready to take Pensive Politics to the next level. I'm ready to do things that would not typically be expected of someone who is just doing this for a hobby. But this is not a hobby for me, my friends. This is a vocation. This is something that is very special. Something that is it animates me, so to speak. And hopefully by listening to the show, watching the show, whether it be on YouTube or listening to it on Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. By the way, please leave a review if you can, on either of those places, especially Apple Podcasts. Leave a review if you can. But hopefully you've gained that this show is primarily about that sort of laboring of ideas that I genuinely care about. So today, my friends, we'll be talking about a few topics. Oh, by the way, as I always begin the show, I am doing great, smiling still, happy. I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. I live by the adage, if you arise to see another day, you are doing better than most people who experienced the opposite that you did. Because there are a lot of people who arise, or who don't never arise to see anything else, who just simply perish. And so if you have not perished physically, or in your soul, or in your spirit, then you are doing good, my friend. I don't care what your financial situation is. I don't care what your love life is like. I don't care what your familial situation is. If you have arisen to see the sun, that is a sign that you have more to do on this earth. All right, so today, guys, we're talking about a few things. President Trump called Dr. Fauci an idiot and lambasted him for his mishandling, or his supposed mishandling, of the coronavirus situation. Now, for those of you who are familiar with me, I have consistently talked about Fauci. I have talked about why Fauci and his tactics and his methods have not been really beneficial to liberty or individualism, and how they have actually eschewed an understanding of ethics and have instead embraced a purely scientific viewpoint on how we should manage society, or if the government should manage society in the first place. And so President Trump is hitting on something very important here. But tone is the issue, my friends. So I'm not so concerned about President Trump as I am concerned about the tone in which his ideas are delivered. But let's talk about the idea of the pandemic expert getting things wrong. That's really what he's talking about here. We'll also discuss a poll out by Mr. Rasmussen, a piece by Scott Rasmussen it is titled, "No, our democracy and freedom are not on the line this election." Amen. I have been saying this tirelessly, and it just angers me to no end that some people have the audacity to put the concepts that forged America, which have endured much more than 4 years of light chaos, they have put them on the line for eternal destitution. and that's wrong. And so we'll explore that with Mr. Rasmussen in a moment. Also, Mike Pompeo said it is dangerous for social media companies to take, in his words, a non-viewpoint neutral stance. A non-viewpoint neutral stance. This was, of course, emerged from a decision by Twitter earlier last week, to block a story from the New York Post about Hunter Biden. And so we'll talk about all that and more in today's edition of Pensive Politics with Mr. Watson. All right, guys. So, Dr. Fauci. So Dr. Fauci, for those of you who do not know, although I would hope that you know who Dr. Fauci is, Dr. Fauci has been the leading infectious disease specialist in the country since the 80s, really. He's 79 years old. He's been around for quite a long time. He is considered the go-to expert on these issues, and the coronavirus pandemic has kind of made him a media star. With him being a regular staple at President Trump's press conferences, and also just making the rounds in media. He's been on nighttime TV, late night TV. He's been on CNN, Fox, everywhere. So President Trump unleashed his true opinions about Dr. Fauci, and this shouldn't surprise us because look. We understand that many people on the right, myself included, have reservations about Mr. Fauci. Serious reservations. Because, well, simply, I don't think Dr. Fauci understands the importance of ethical principles as they relate to governing philosophies. I don't think Dr. Fauci understands the importance of ethical principles as they relate to governing philosophies. What do I mean? Well, Fauci, like a scientist, is concerned about figures, facts, numbers, data. This is not a fault of him. The scientific method is itself concerned about figures, facts, data, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, those things being tested as well. But unfortunately, the scientific method and the experimentation surrounding the race to understand the coronavirus pandemic has not at all been confined to a controlled environment that has very few people on the line. It has instead, unfortunately, had all of us as the guinea pigs. So President Trump mentioned that Dr. Fauci was inconsistent in his prognosis of the best way to ward off the coronavirus. This is not incorrect. First, Fauci said that masks were not required for a majority of people. Then he said, no, masks are certainly required. First, Fauci said that the government shut down. Perhaps we should, not go there. Then he said, yes, we should shut down the government. Not the government. The government should shut down society. I mean, Fauci has been on every single side of every single issue as it relates to this pandemic. Now, the argument can be advanced that the nature of science and information, especially with a novel virus, is that things develop. And as facts and things develop, the experts who institute them into policy or advise policymakers will similarly change and develop their opinions. They'll refine them. That's a fine argument. The problem is, the key variable in that argument is us. We are the guinea pigs. This is not an experiment. But Fauci has been treating this entire coronavirus pandemic as an experiment. This is what happens when you have a purely scientific viewpoint instituted into government policy. Because science is not necessarily concerned with a lot of these higher order principles. It's based on them, but modern day science is concerned immediately about results. Of course, there's debates about bioethics and everything like that. And those are where, But the reason the debate about bioethics even exists, with stem cell research and so on and so forth, is because there has been a lapse between scientific thinking and ethical considerations historically, my friends. So when Fauci says, yes, let's shut down the American economy, he's thinking, to his credit, from a quote-unquote public safety perspective. A public safety perspective. He's not thinking in terms of the infringement upon individual rights such an action could pose. He's not thinking in terms of the economic costs such an action could pose. He's not thinking about the violation of property rights such an action could pose. He's not thinking about more of the, some would say esoteric. I would just say ethical consequences. The precedent could be set. He's not thinking about all these kind of things. He's thinking about, look, we have a number of people who are perishing beneath the plague. We have to slow the plague down. We have to fight the plague. The plague spreads through hosts. So logically, we have to make sure there are fewer hosts in concert or near people who are infected, and you have to isolate them so that the hosts can get cured or whatever, or just the virus can die off. That was Fauci's thinking. That's fine. But that thinking is best used in a laboratory setting until ethics can catch up with it. If ethics follows scientific policy making, I think you have a great potential for there to be rights violations. And if there are rights violations, then the very basis of what these scientists are trying to, in a roundabout way, protect the individual against this virus has been harmed in an execrable way. And execrable just means very bad. In a very bad way. So by embracing the kind of thinking that Fauci has embraced throughout the history of this pandemic, we are actually harming the individual more than the virus would. That's simple as that. Because without rights, we lose the force that keeps us going. Without rights, we lose the justification for our human being. Without rights, we lose the grounds to apply reason. Without rights, we lose a lot of things without rights. We lose our ability to be human without rights. Without rights, we lose a lot of things. Without rights, we use a lot of things. And so that's the primary thing with Fauci. Now, President Trump could have said this in that way, but I think President Trump was far more concerned about stating his opinion about Dr. Fauci, and that's fine. I don't agree with how he said it. I wish that he would be a little bit more careful and word his critiques more responsibly and not be so incendiary in his language, but I understand why he said it. And this issue is an issue that far transcends President Trump. This issue is an issue that far transcends Dr. Fauci. It's an issue that belabors all of us, my good friends. Belabors all of us. And exhorts us to have a conscious awakening about the nature of our rights in the midst of public health crises. And I discussed this with Aaron Brook earlier when the virus started to really get in speed back in March, April. I discussed this with Aaron Brook. For those of you who do not know, Aaron Brook is the head of the Iran Institute. Chairman. I suppose he's retired now. He's still the chairman emeritus, I believe, of the Iran Institute, but he's doing other stuff right now. He's doing, before the pandemic, he was doing like public speaking and all that kind of stuff. But still, he is in the Iran Institute, and he has a YouTube channel. I encourage you guys to go check it out, Aaron Brook. And he said to me, look, Christian, public health considerations should not come at the risk of individual rights, but we should do contact tracing. And that's what he supported and things like that. And I mean, Fauci's been a supporter of contact tracing as well. And again, I think the issue with contact tracing is that it comes too dangerously close to violating rights in my mind, because to institute contact tracing, practically, it requires a degree of information that I would be very concerned with the government having. If there were a way to institute contact tracing without being obtrusive, perhaps I would consider it. But there does not appear to be a way to do that. And if there's not a way to do that, then I don't think I can support it. Anything that is meant to protect me in my station in life should not, in the same breath, violate my ability to experience life, i.e. my rights. This is the principle America was built upon. This is the principle that Thomas Paine talked about in The Rights of Men and in Common Sense. This is the principle that John Locke codified and launched a brilliant philosophical defense of in the Secretaries of Government. This is the principle by which the spoils of the American lifestyle, the spoils of American freedom, spring from. This is the principle by which we can even have a conversation about protecting anything. This is the first philosophy of rights, as Aristotle would say. First philosophy. That's what this is. And so if there is someone that doesn't get that, you have complications. Severe complications. Severe. Seriously. And so this is why you have to be very careful when it comes to scientific thinking, or prioritizing scientific thinking over the ethical considerations. Be very careful. Very, very careful. And so another thing, my friends, which I find concerning, and I even talked about this in the piece I did about Van Morrison, and for those of you who have not seen it, you can go to MarianWest.com. It's Van Morrison's Dangerous Songs, the legend himself, Van Morrison, Grammy Award-winning singer. He retweeted it. I said about Van Morrison, I said, Van Morrison's basically saying, I mean, forget the quote-unquote public health considerations. Van Morrison is saying that I have rights. My rights are inviolable, and you need to phrase your policy decisions around my rights. If you don't, you end up risking a grievous violation of my rights, and that is under no circumstance acceptable. That's what Morrison was saying. That's precisely what Morrison was saying. And so that's the conversation we need to have in America. But we should do it in a much more respectful way. Again, the president did not do this in a very respectful way, but the sentiment is correct. The president's sentiment is correct. That Fauci... Now, I wouldn't call Fauci an idiot. He's far from an idiot. He's quite smart in his own way. I wouldn't call Fauci an idiot of any sort. But I would call him tone deaf. He is tone deaf. Fauci is tone deaf to the considerations that transcend the scientific data. But this is not a problem with Fauci himself. This is more so a problem with a lot of scientists in America and and the problem of scientism. And so Mary Midgley, late Mary Midgley, a ethicist out of Britain, who lived to be almost 100 years old and died recently. I don't agree with a lot of things that she says. She's a more of the animal rights kind of variety, and I don't believe that. But she did have a scathing article in the Guardian, where she attacked the basis of Richard Dawkins' belief in the selfish gene. So Richard Dawkins believed that there was this deterministic gene built into every human being that meant that we were destined to be selfish. That's what Dawkins believed. Now, I do believe that human beings are motivated by their self-interest, but this is not a result of a genetic predisposition. And so Midgley attacked individualism, but she also attacked the sort of scientism, she called it, the scientific underpinnings of that idea. And so I think Fauci reflects a lot of that kind of stuff. So there is an anger in America. There's an anger in America about Dr. Fauci. There's an anger in America. There's an anger in America about the experts. There's an anger. Now, some of it is anti-intellectual, I agree. But some of it is just genuine concern. And what the media likes to do, they like to take genuine concern, mix it up with some of the more anti-intellectual elements, and package the sentiment as being anti-intellectual and therefore dangerous to all of our survival. That's what they use, these collective tactics to gaslight us and make us seem as if we have any objections whatsoever to the experts, that we're trying to destroy people, or we're trying to destroy ourselves, or we don't want people to be safe. No. I don't need to be an expert to have an idea about what is best for my life. I don't need to be an expert. I don't need to be certified by the American Psychiatric Association to have an idea about what is best for my mental health. I don't need to be an expert. I don't need to be an infectious disease expert to have an idea about what is best for my existence in a time of sickness and plague. I don't need to be an expert to determine things about me. Experthood is external to me, therefore I do not need to be an expert. Now, it helps to have expert opinions, which is why we have doctors and dentists and lawyers, because we're not well-rounded in everything. There is no true Renaissance man who can be a doctor or a lawyer. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But these people provide guidelines, signposts, so to speak, as we would call an academic debate. They don't provide certainties. You need to provide the certainty for you about your life. That's my bit about Fauci and at that entire charade with President Trump attacking him today at a campaign call. Really, guys, just understand that you are the ultimate arbiter of your existence, and that is what matters. That is what matters. All right, so we're about to come down to the end of the first segment. Guys, as I encourage you, please, I want you to subscribe on YouTube. I want you to subscribe on Spotify. I want you to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. I want you to leave reviews. I want you to do everything in your power to make sure that this operation continues to go full speed ahead, because I believe in Pensive Politics. I believe in you. I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the message that we are putting out, but it requires your support, so please do that. YouTube, go to Christian Watson and just type in Pensive Politics on YouTube or anywhere else. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, just type in Pensive Politics and subscribe, because we're going to get out here and we're going to do our very best to make the most lasting impression that's ever been made on modern day American politics. I promise you that. I promise you that, my friends. All right, guys. We're coming up to segment 2. So, thank you so much for listening. And please stick with us. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright everyone, welcome back to segment 2 of Pensive Politics, Mr. Watson. Again, I am your host, as always, Christian Watson. That has not changed in the past few minutes. Not at all. Well, my friends, again, before I go any further, and I begin providing my analysis of the next few issues, I just must thank you so much for, again, listening to me, watching me, supporting me, because truly it is that listenership and that support that helps drive forth my goals into a more manifest state. And so just know that I love all of you dearly, that you mean a lot to me, that Pensive Politics means a lot to me, and that you will continue to be rewarded with your listenership by cogent, common political analysis. I promise you. All right, guys. So, Scott Rasmussen. I'm sure you've heard the last name. If you have good Rasmussen polling, good. He is one of the most eminent pollsters in the country. He recently wrote a piece for an outlet that I suggest all of you check out called the DeseretNews.com. And his thesis is, no, our democracy and freedom are not on the line this election. The tagline says, it's important to remember that American society isn't nearly as polarized as American politics. That's the good news. Amen. No, there have not been more truer, more prescient words uttered by any public figure in American society than these, especially when someone is collecting the data on the divisions in political opinions. When you have someone collecting the data on it, that gives him more weight for his opinions. So I will read this piece, and I will provide my analysis afterwards. So, from henceforth, this is Mr. Rasmussen speaking. I am vocalizing his words. I'm giving life to his words now. One of the things that never fails to amaze me as a pollster is the absolute intensity that accompanies the final weeks of a presidential campaign. A poll I conducted recently for healthinsurance.com found that 82% of senior citizens think that this is the most important presidential election of their lifetime. Think about that. That's what senior citizens are saying. These are voters who were around when the Berlin Wall went up and the Cold War was being fought in the space race. The Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, Woodstock, and Watergate were part of their life experience. And yet, now they say this year, 2020, is the most important presidential election in their lifetime. Of course, you don't need a poll to sense the intensity that some activists and voters bring to the election season. Supporters of both Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden regularly assert the nation will never recover if the other side wins. Our democracy or our freedom will be lost. This shouldn't surprise me. It happens every 4 years. But it catches me off guard because I don't agree with the assessment. America will survive another 4 years of Donald Trump as president, or the first 4 years of Joe Biden as president. There will be differences, of course, because elections matter. They have consequences. But it's important to remember that politicians aren't nearly as important as they think they are. They don't determine the nation's agenda or decide the fate of the nation. The culture leads, and politicians lag behind. It's also important to remember that American society isn't nearly as polarized as American politics. That's the good news. Still, it seems like a good time to review the data and assess where we are as election 2020 draws to a close. The place to start is with a number that partisan activists find impossible to believe. My polling shows that 14% of voters, 1 out of 7, are not fully certain how they will vote. That number includes some who currently support Trump or Biden, but could change their mind. It also includes some who are currently leaning towards a third-party candidate. Historically, many such voters end up deciding at the last minute to reluctantly vote for one of the major party candidates. And there are a few who just don't like the choice before them. In a sense, this group of uncommitted voters might be best described as voters who want both Trump and Biden to lose. While most are unlikely to change their mind, the possibility remains that something might happen to cause a late break in either direction. As a result, with 2 weeks to go, it's best to consider a range of possibilities. Biden and the Democrats are ahead at the moment, but victory is not assured. I'll start with the best case scenario for the Republicans. If the race gets a bit tighter, election 2020 would be a toss-up with the presidency determined by a few key states. Places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It will seem like 4 years ago, with one big exception. This time around, extensive mail-in voting means we wouldn't know the winner for weeks. And we also wouldn't know who controls the Senate, the results in a couple dozen House races, and who has control of a few state legislatures. But, with a tightening race and a few breaks, the president could be reelected and Republicans could hang on to control of the Senate. But the best scenario for the right will involve weeks of chaos before the final outcome can be determined. At the other extreme, the best case scenario for the Democrats would see Biden holding modestly expanding his lead. If that happens, it's possible that Biden would be declared the winner in Florida on election night. That would end any hope of a comeback for President Trump, and it would likely guarantee a Democratic majority in the Senate. But when this most important race of our lifetime ends, the next one will begin. And the humbling reality for whoever wins this is that there will likely be a backlash in the 2022 midterm elections. Wow. So, Mr. Rasmussen is approaching this issue from a pragmatic, practical point of view. Mr. Rasmussen is simply saying that he hears this line recited all the time, and that when it's compared to the history of the voters who are saying this, it doesn't make any sense. And also that, again, the country has faced much more trying times than this. Seriously. And that the culture and everything changed. So this is a very important thing, my friends. We have this idea that the state, the government, controls culture. And that whoever gets elected is affirmative of the overall culture. I find this point to be disturbing. Seriously. For example, Nixon was president during the height of the counterculture. Now, Nixon was recorded several times lambasting the Roman emperors for being gay, ranting about the supposed cultural destitution of his times in TV and cinema and so on and so forth, and just talking about how he didn't want to be bothered with the rest of the country and attacking his political enemies, so on and so forth. This man was the president of the United States of America, and he had no control over the millions of anti-Vietnam War protests. He had no control over the counterculture and the changes in drugs and sexual identity and general identity that came with that. He had no control over that. In fact, they happened notwithstanding him being in office. Because whereas the counterculture was like a dynamic river flowing down, Nixon was like a static rock. Not a bad thing entirely, but this is the truth. The politics of the 60s was not always neatly reflected in the culture. Let me give you a more tame example. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. They had to push and push and push for legislation. Because there wasn't a single person in the political system, or there were very few people in the political system, who were sympathetic to them. And those that were up against other people, the Southern Democrats, like Strom Thurmond and so on and so forth, who were hell-bent, and Robert Byrd, who were hell-bent on ensuring that segregation remained a law of the land. But the culture had already decided, had already affirmed that that kind of separation was bad, vile, disgusting, a violation of rights, and that they were not going to have it stand under a legal framework. It was the culture that imposed a change in the political system. You have to understand this. Let's take a more contemporary example. Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump. 47% of voters picked him. Donald Trump's kind of politics is not indicative of wider American culture, even right-leaning culture. It hit a nerve with people because of what the status quo did to them and their emotions. But Donald Trump's kind of politicking is not emblematic of a majority of America. America is indeed a right-leaning country, but Trump's a little bit more of a political anomaly than that. A little bit more. So again, we have to define very clearly, when we're talking about culture here, what we mean and understand that culture almost entirely exists in a different vacuum than politics. And Rasmussen was smart to point this out. He was very smart to point this out. Because a lot of people assume, oh, if we change the politics, the culture will change. Well, President Trump's been president for like 4 years so far. Me Too has become a big thing. The cancel culture is still here. There are a lot of vile things that have arisen under President Trump, but it's not his fault. Because the president cannot control the culture. See what I'm saying? We have to stop viewing the state or the government or those who are in power over it as these sort of quasi-deities. Because we presume them to be deities. We have to quit that, my friends. We have to stop assuming that they are actually deities. Or that they can easily, with the stroke of a pen, change some cultural thing to be whatever they want it to be. No. Because what is the government? The government is force. And force is not the best way to institute change. It's a good way to institute compliance. But compliance can change a different thing. So let's say you have a situation in which the government wants to use force on a tax evader to prevent him from evading taxes. Well, they may be able to do that, but they'll never be able to change the tax evader's mind and the contents of his heart, which is that his hard-earned money or her hard-earned money should not go to people who didn't earn it themselves. That is the core sentiment of the tax evader. Therefore, the government instituting force has done nothing but produce a material result, an illusory change, which is not an actual change. Change of heart and change of conscience are the true changes. And those are the changes that produce action. Those are the changes that produce circumstances. There are plenty of people who wanted to dodge the draft who were conscripted off to Vietnam, but they didn't want to be there. And a lot of them tried to do everything in their power to not be the best soldiers they could have been because they didn't want to be there. If you do not change the heart, you have ultimately changed nothing. So if the government thinks that it can produce change, cultural change through force, you'll have illusory change, yes, but you won't actually have real change. This is one of the reasons why I think anti-discrimination laws are wrong. Well, ineffective, more so. They're wrong because they're oftentimes an infringement upon property rights, but still, they're ineffective because they're an attempt of the government to manifest a certain idea of how someone's supposed to act with their property through force, or through this threat of force. That is what anti-discrimination laws are. But do they work? Are they effective? Even if they were, they would still be wrong, but are they effective? And the answer to that is no. Of course not. No. Because if you try to force a racist business owner to provide business to people who they don't like, their skin color or whatever, he's still racist at the end of the day. And his racism will manifest in different ways, perhaps more covert ways. I made this point in a piece for GlennBeck.com a year ago. So I just don't understand why we have this idea that government can change culture. But at the heart of this idea is that elections are vitally important. Vitally important for the survival of the nation. But they're not. They aren't, my friends. Brian Hyde, an amazing person, amazing guy, head of the Federal Ravens Network, he made a point in his show the other day. He said that ultimately the only ones who can truly manifest change are you. Take that. Understand that. Let that sink into your mind. Let that drive your actions, my friend. Let me give you a more compact example. So, for example, this is a Platonic dialogue I'm holding up here. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, a Platonic dialogue. Most people who are academics and who like Plato I found have not read this. Now, I have several such dialogues across my desk right now. If you saw my desk, you'd be horrified. Dialogues, philosophical texts. Even with the threat of a bad grade behind me, I could not be forced to effectively engage with this text if I didn't want to. My will is more powerful than the threat of bad grades, threat of coercion. I'm not going to. I could be forced to engage. Well, I could be compelled to engage the text. But again, ultimately, the effectiveness of the compulsion relies on me. But let's say I'm compelled to engage with the text. This text, you can see, pretty, it's pretty, it's very holistic. There's a lot in it. No one can force me to engage with this effectively. And so if I don't engage in this text effectively, the point of getting me to engage in it in the first place was moot. There's an impracticality resting there, my friends. So that's my point. Government does not change culture. Culture sometimes changes government. Worry about the culture. Do not worry about the government. All right, that's it for that one. Mike Pompeo. Oh, my Lord. Mike Pompeo. One of my least favorite administration officials, Mike Pompeo, made a somewhat okay point. He said that in an interview with Washington Examiner, according to The Hill, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called Twitter's decision to block a story in the New York Post about emails from Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, dangerous. Pompeo said, "This is dangerous. It is dangerous when a powerful force like the communications tool, which is Twitter, adopts a non-viewpoint neutral of the world." He also went on to praise social media companies for their work in taking down posts by terrorists and cooperating with the U.S. government, but stated they cannot allow disinformation. Okay. They have to make a choice. It's either going to be viewpoint neutral, they can let thousands of flowers bloom, or they're going to make a different decision. And that decision cannot be based on whether it is supportive of this administration or attempting to undermine America. That's just inappropriate. Well, first, I think that there's something to be said about you wanting Twitter to work with the government to thwart terrorist operations, and yet you don't want their value calculus to be based on if the person on their platforms undermines America or is trying to undermine America. That's a walking contradiction, number one. Number two, I think he's right. These platforms should be neutral to viewpoints. He's right. But I don't think it is appropriate for me to determine what is appropriate or not appropriate for someone in the use of their own property, so long as their actions do not aggress against my well-being or my body or whatever. So if the non-aggression principle is still intact at the end of the day, then I don't have any right to tell someone what is appropriate or not appropriate with the exercise of their own property. I don't know why Pompeo is doing that. Now, and the article mentioned this as well. But look, a lot of people on the right have a good point about big tech. Big tech, big tech has been caught several times thwarting conservative opinions. Making it so they're harder to find. But as a friend of mine, Sacha Maher, I hope I'm not butchering that, Sacha, said in an interview the other day, big tech only draws attention to conservative causes and further builds the shield of imperviousness around certain conservative figures by trying to censor them. That's interesting, isn't it? So, the censorship is not actually being all that effective. It's rattling the cage and it's causing a lot of conservatives to say, okay, well, hold up. What the hell is going on here? But is it actually making it harder for their message to get out? I don't think so. It's making it easier in a sense because they are drawing attention to this kind of stuff. So that's something to think about, my friends. Think about that. Is big tech really hurting conservatives, or are they drawing attention to conservative viewpoints and causes by doing this sort of censorious stuff? And we'll talk about big tech later. We'll have a long conversation about big tech. I mean, big tech is a very, very convoluted topic. Glenn Beck has a big special on it that I encourage all of you to watch. But it's very convoluted. And I intend to stick with Twitter and Facebook and all this. Because ultimately, my friends, let's be honest, they are the best way to keep an audience engaged and get our message out there. We can go to Parler or Gab or all those other places and we can scream and shout. But ultimately, I think a majority of conservative media will continue to rely on the mainstream avenues, and they should, because those are sustainable. I don't think Parler and all those kind of other avenues are sustainable. Now, that's not to say don't open one. I mean, that's fine. I'm thinking of opening one myself. But understand what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. That's what I'm saying, okay? Understand that, and then operate from that. Go from that. Don't try to make something sustainable which is not going to be sustainable for the long term. That's all I'm saying. Alrighty. We're getting down to the end of the show. You guys have been an awesome audience. Thank you so much for staying this long, listening to me rant on about these things. If I'm going to begin doing a moral of the day at the end of every single show that I finish. A moral of the day. So, what is the moral of the day of this show? Well, my friends, the moral of the day is quite simple. Trust in your ability to actualize change on your terms. Do not embrace cowardice and think that change is solely a result of things that are beyond you. You are the change agent. You are the person who can decide for your life, for your family, what is best. The Fauci stories tell you that. The Pompeo stories tell you that. The Rasmussen stories tell you that. All these stories I picked out with the intention of conveying this message, this lesson, this aphorism. You are the greatest change agent there ever has been. You are the greatest change agent there ever will be. Believe that. Take that. Manifest it. And show the world just how great you are. Because I believe you can do it. You have it inside of you. You have the ability to do it. You have the obligation to do it. Take that, and forever shall American politics be differentiated because of your actions. Forever shall it be manifested differently because of your actions. Forever shall people never consider the concept the same way they do because of your actions. It is within you, my friends. All right. It's been great talking to all of you today. I just want to say, thank you for listening. Please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so on and so forth. Pensive Politics, Christian Watson, either one of those, come up. But as always, my friends, please, thank you and stay pensive.